We would like to welcome everyone joining us today to celebrate STEM Week, especially the students and teachers, to learn more about the amazing STEM careers out there. If everyone could please let us know who you are in the chat, and if you're an educator, tell us what school or program you're joining us from, how many students you've brought along, and what grade. Everyone also please share your experience with us today on social media with the hashtags in the chat. We would love to hear what you think. My name is Tsungai Jackson, and I'm your host for Science STEM Week panel this afternoon. I currently work as a rotational research associate supporting the discovery platform for the Rare Disease Research Unit at Pfizer. I am a recent graduate and alumni of the University of Massachusetts Amherst with a BS in biochemistry and molecular biology and a minor in psychology. I am also a BPS and a Project On-Ramp alum, and I'm very excited to welcome you to today's panel. I am joined by an amazing group of STEM professionals who are here to share their stories with you all. First, we have Andrew Rodriguez, who leads the business development for bioprocessing division of Millipore Sigma. In his role, Andrew oversees tech scouting, licensing, IP alignment, technology roadmaps, partnerships, M&A and divestitures, alliance management, and post-merger integration. Outside work, Andrew is passionate about social equity and has been actively involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. He was a founding member of Latinos in Bio, Millipore Stigma's Leaders of Color Action Network, Deloitte's Latinx ERG, and Milagros para Niños Council for Children Hospital, Boston. He recently spoke in the topic of implicit biases in workplace tension at Launch Bio. Next, we have Ndidi Rickett, who was born and raised in Sierra Leone to a Sierra Leonean mother and mixed race father, and finished her education in the United Kingdom. She started her career after university in London and worked for Parexel, then Merck Sharp and Dohme. She moved to the United States, where she worked for several life science companies until she landed at Ultragenyx Pharmaceutical Incorporated as the Associate Director in Clinical Quality Assurance, specializing in data integrity, vendor oversight, and process optimization. She also leads the X2 Women in Biotech Group Speaker Series, as well as a founding member of the Ultra Mosaic Employee Resource Group. Next, we have Ramsey Johnston, who is the founder and chairperson for the nonprofit organization OutBio, the only advocacy group for LGBTQ plus members of the Boston life sciences community. OutBio has a membership of over 12,000 people, 1,200 people. The organization holds regular events hosted by biopharma firms which elevate LGBTQ plus issues and visibility within the industry. The organization recently announced its first chapter located in the UK and rolled out a mentor program that pairs seasoned LGBTQ plus life science professionals with individuals just starting their careers. Future plans include scholarships, life science employee resource groups, ERG, forums, and establishment of additional OutBio chapters outside the Boston area. In addition to his duties with OutBio, Ramsey is a 24-year drug development veteran with experience in both clinical and regulatory operations. Ramsey specializes in rare orphan diseases and is currently the Vice President Operations for Phoenix Tissue Repair. Lastly but not least, we are joined by Larson Hogstrom, who is a scientist at Exact Sciences, where he works on computational modeling of genomic sequencing data to improve cancer screening. Previously, he worked as a staff scientist at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard and received his master's from MIT in computational science. I will get us started, but please ask any questions you might have in the chat or Q&A function on Zoom. Science isn't usually the favorite subject of students, and it can be a lot of work. And I know that for myself, it's pretty hard. So first, my question to you all is, how did you get to where you are today? Who got you interested? What or who got you interested? What struggles did you face and how did you overcome those obstacles? And who helped you along the way? First, we're going to start with you, Andrew, and then we'll go to Ndidi, and then we'll have Larson and Ramsey.
Yes, thank you, Tsungai. Thank you for the question. There's an old adage that says, it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to raise a child and to continue to grow as an adult, to be honest with you. Yeah, actually, I don't think that this was high on the radar when I was very young. I had a teacher in middle school who was just really passionate about science. And I think his excitement got me excited. And one of the things I learned is I can make money this way. I started like joining like science fairs and writing papers, and I started like winning money to be able to pay for college. And I had this view that I would go to college, but I knew my parents couldn't afford it. So anything I could do to help along the way really helped out. And then I remember one summer job when I was working somewhere, I just happened to connect with some guy who was happened to be a VP at a department. I didn't know this. We would just get coffee in the morning. And he asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I kind of like this science thing because, I've been making money over the last few years just for college. And he introduced me to a school in New York that was a full scholarship school. And I interviewed there before the start of my senior year, and I got accepted. And that was Cooper Union. And that's where I ended up going to university. And that was a big feeder school to, a science and technology career, which is where I started. I started as an engineer originally. But then I made a shift to the business side of things, and it was kind of like starting a little bit all over again because I was working for tech companies on the business side of things. And there too was always kind of either alumni from school or people that I met that were advocates that might introduce me to something new or an organization I had not heard from. And that's what it ended up kind of being my way to ending up where I am now. So I'm at Millipore Sigma, and I've been here for 7 years and changed roles a couple of times. And that too was the same way, right? People approach me and say, hey, there's this new opportunity opening up over here. Would you be interested in? And part of that also is expressing your desire to try new things, remaining curious, and figuring out how you can have an impact in the things that you do. So that would be kind of the way I kind of ended up here. I won't bore you with all the details because there was a lot of, turns up, down, left, and right along the journey for sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate that. Next, we have Ndidi.
Hello, everyone. How did I get started? I want to start with 2 words: power, magic, and power. I'll tell you why I went with those 2 words. I had a mother who studied geography at school all the way to university and couldn't get jobs. She had to go back and learn how to be a teacher, and she did the arts where she did English and literature, and would always say there were no jobs in the arts back then, at least back in West Africa. And so she always thought that if she had her children go into the sciences, they could eventually pivot into the arts if they wanted to. But it's harder to pivot into science if you haven't done that initially. And so she was adamant her 3 children were going to do sciences, and I was fine with it. We pretty much coasted initially as I was as a child, but as we were streamlined into the sciences from an early age, and it became really, really tough. I say, to Andrew's point, stay curious. I asked all the questions. It was really tough, blood, sweat, and tears. But I think, and it didn't come natural. But what I say to children is that there's magic in each and every one of us. Find your magic, whatever it is. We would like for it to be in science, because science is exciting. STEM in general, whether it's technology, math, it's having the staying power, right? You need to, within yourself, to stick with it. I leaned on a lot of teachers. I would stay behind in class, ask additional questions. Actually, when I even failed at college, I would stay behind and ask the lecturer what else I could do, because sometimes I partied a little bit too hard. But stay behind, negotiate my grades, and finding a way forward. So I say to kids who want to go into STEM, have the passion. I was only ever interested in biology. Find that passion, whatever it is that you're interested in. let that be your hook. Stay in power, stay curious, ask the questions, and yeah, there's magic in you.
Thank you so much, Ndidi. Next, we have Ramsey.
Hey everyone, to make sure I wasn't on mute. Yeah, so I think my path is a bit of a combination of the last two stories we heard. I think I always loved the sciences. I was good at science and math. I was okay at my other subjects as well, but science and math were sort of what I was passionate about. And so I was the first person in my family that went to college, and so it was sort of a no-brainer for me. I thought about, well, what am I going to do? And I'll be a doctor, I guess. Like that was sort of what everyone was sort of pushing me towards. So that was the plan when I did my undergrad, was bio pre-med. But then I graduated and wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I still had an interest in med school, but I had a lot of financial constraints, just like Andrew, and sort of financed my undergrad by myself, begged, borrowed, and stole to finish my undergrad, and just wasn't prepared to do that for med school. And so just really stumbled into clinical research, actually, sort of by accident. Went to an open house at ParExcel, which is a Boston-based contract research organization. Started sort of entry-level data manager and have just kind of worked my way up ever since. And I think have had some really great mentors. I think it was Andrew that mentioned he's had some really great people that have kind of guided him, and he's made some great relationships, and that's sort of been my story as well. I always say I'm probably not the very best at what I do. I'm not the best clinical researcher there is, but one of the things I am good at is meeting people and maintaining relationships, and have just been really fortunate to have some great mentors that have moved on to other things and have asked me to follow them and to join them. And so I've sort of attached myself to some really great and very generous and really smart people over the years. So I guess that would be my advice: is sort of follow your passion. If you're passionate about science and math, that is absolutely the direction that you should go in. And then just forge relationships, meet great people, have some good mentors, and they'll really help you sort of guide you in your career path and chosen profession.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Ramsey. Larson.
Hey everyone, my name's Larson. So unlike many of the Boston public school students that we're speaking to today, I didn't grow up in any kind of city environment. I'm originally from Vermont, and I grew up in a rural place. And I don't think I knew any scientists. I can't remember having ever met any scientists when I was a kid. Just far away from, in Vermont, you're far away from universities, far away from places like in Boston where you have companies and groups of scientists. So Indeedy talked about finding your passion. And for me, it took a while to actually be able to discover and really get in depth into my interest in science. I grew up doing construction with my dad, and I credit him for learning a lot about hard work and discipline and being methodical. And I think that's one personality trait that is very valuable as a scientist. But like Ramsey, I saw myself going at first into medicine. I thought maybe I would become a nurse. It seems like something that was practical, and I like the idea of caring for people. And I had one friend's mom who said, Larson, I think you're smart enough to be a doctor. And that was something that was really valuable to me, to have that early kind of spur to think hard and think about how you can position yourself towards leadership. So I spent most of college assuming that I was eventually going to become a doctor, just like Ramsey. But through my college experience, I actually got my first exposure into doing science and working in a lab, in that I was very much hooked on. So I studied biochemistry during undergrad and got my first exposure to doing computational biology and research, which I can talk more about. But after college, I spent about 10 years working in academic labs, either as an employee or as a graduate student, and had a great time getting those kind of academic experiences and working on publishing data and studies. And eventually I found my way to a private company. I work at Exact right now. And it's been really exciting to be also on the commercial side of things, where you're refining some of those exciting scientific ideas and thinking about how can we position it to actually be used by patients in the clinic. So that's where I am today. And it's great to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Larson. But I want to thank everyone for sharing. I'm pretty sure that your experiences will help some of the BPS students we have today maybe realize that science is their passion. For everyone that is on Zoom, please start sharing your own questions, and we'll start asking the panelists after the next question. So I'm curious to explore the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion with you all. It's no mystery that the STEM field lacks diversity. And I've experienced this myself, having done a lot of internships and being the only Black student in the entire company. So for aspiring students to see them, I know it's difficult that for aspiring students to see themselves in this workplace. What are your opinions on how you can diversify and make the industry more accessible and inclusive to those that are typically underrepresented? And have you or your company or anyone you know found success in doing so? And what does that look like? So this time we're gonna go backwards. So we're gonna actually start with you, Larson, and then we can go to Ramsey, and then Ndidi and Andrew.
Sure. So the topic that you bring up is extremely complicated. It involves many different facets of not only how science works and has been built up over many years, but how our society is structured. So I'll take one small piece of that puzzle and describe it, which is thinking about how can we have more people of color in leadership positions, either within industry or within academia. And I've worked on this problem with other people in two different settings, one in an academic setting as a graduate student, where we were working as a group of students trying to petition faculty and petition the university to challenge itself to do more to bring in diverse faculty and train them and eventually tenure them so that they can really be a part of the system. I also worked in a similar problem within a private research institute, really trying to tackle that same problem of how do you bring in a diverse group of scientific leaders who effectively run the institution. And that's a topic that I'm really passionate about. I would say, just briefly, two pieces of advice for people who are interested in these topics is, one, make sure that you work together. Find a good group of people who are equally passionate about it and ready to put work in, and make sure you enjoy spending time with them, because it's a very difficult and messy problem, and you're going to have to tackle that. If you want to go after the systemic thing, it takes a lot of work. So make sure you find a great group of people. And two, my second piece of advice is, if you go into this type of advocacy work, make sure you do a good job at painting a vision for, if you're to unlock some facet of diversity, how does that enhance the whole system, or how does that bring benefit to the people who work within the organization, and really be creative in how you paint that picture.
Thank you, Larson. That was very good advice. And I hope that, in the future, we can tackle this problem a little bit more aggressively to benefit the students that are currently in the Zoom. So next we have Ramsey. You're unmuted, Ramsey.
See, I knew I was going to do it at some point. It's a great question. It's something that I get asked a lot through our work at OutBio, is sort of, how can we attract a more diverse sort of talent pipeline? And, I think the biggest mistake that companies make is they sort of start too late, right? They start thinking about diversity when they have an open position, and they think, how can we get a more diverse talent pipeline to come in and interview for this position? So I think you have to start thinking about it way before that. And I totally agree with Larson when he started talking about sort of having people that are sort of visible within the company. So, you know, having a more diverse board, having more diverse leadership within your company. Because, you know, I think people look for those things, right? Like if they're interested in a potential company, they go online, they go into social media, they go on LinkedIn, and they try and figure out, you know, who's on the board, what collaborations do companies have, what nonprofits do they support, things like that. So I think that is super important. I also think that, you know, companies need to find better ways of collaborating with more traditionally underrepresented populations, and there are ways to do that. I mean, you can you can offer internships to community colleges, for example, instead of, you know, always going after the Ivy Leaguers. Is one great way to do it. Offer scholarships and internships to those kids. And then, you know, again, partnering and collaborating with organizations out there that support communities, you know, LGBTQ communities or BIPOC communities. Collaborating, you can collaborate with an organization like OutBio to offer events and resources to its members. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can collaborate with organizations that already exist. You don't necessarily have to recreate the wheel. You can work with entities that are already out there.
Thank you so much, Ramsey. I appreciate all the advice you just shared with us. Next, we have Ndidi.
Yeah, I would say intention. It is a pretty huge problem, the biases in science and STEM. A couple of documentaries I've watched recently. There was one called Black Men in White Coats, where that speaks to the dire underrepresentation of Black men in the medicine field. And one that's called Picture a Scientist. If anybody wants to use that, I think it's also a brilliant documentary showing the underrepresentation and the biases that women face in STEM. It is pretty dire. And so much of these very complex problems we've all known for a while and have remained so. I think only intention is going to make us move the needle. So when I say that, I mean it's on an individual level, it's on an organizational level, as well as perhaps on a societal level, where individually, to your point, Tsungai, you had to have the self-administration to go after what you wanted. Teachers, I can't give you guys enough props. Continue to light those blue flames that Larson talked about. When you see a little kid that's interested, encourage them, because you don't know, they themselves don't know at that point what it is that they're even interested in. So I think when a teacher even just injects that little positivity into a child, it makes a huge difference. And that starts the blue flame that I'm talking about, that just gets lit up, and they want to continue being curious and leaning into science. And knowing that no one's perfect, you can go after it with yourself, your magic, and with a collective power, and with intention. At an organizational level, it's thankfully I work for Ultragenyx, a rare disease company, ultra rare diseases within the genetic space. We have a formidable founder and chief operating officer who from the start believes in, you know, science, rare diseases, and what we can do. I mean, from top down, we have women in our leadership team, we have people of color, and I think at an organizational level, it has to be encouraged. The intention has to be there, where you set it as a corporate goal that we want to hire people. You have Rooney rules, so that the systemic barriers are broken, and you are intentional about hiring, promoting, and retaining the talent that that an organization needs. And I think at a societal level, each one of us, right? Let us vote. Let that be your power. Let us change the dynamics across the board, changing policies, whatever it is. So yeah, at all levels, I think we have not yet achieved any form of parity, but I think with it's incumbent on all of us to do that. And with intention, we'll be able to make a change eventually, or at least head in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Andrew.
Yes, thank you. So it's interesting going last because I can build on the great comments that my colleagues have made, right? So Ndidi painted out an interesting framework across the the individual up to society, and what we heard Larson talk a little bit about is kind of the framework of basically the pipeline, right? It starts very young and it works all the way through. And Ramsey kind of reinforced that, and I think that that's critical. When we launched our Leaders of Color Action Network here at Millipore Sigma, that was the intention, to look at the pipeline and see where we were and the changes that we needed to make. And to Larson's perspective, we try to paint this vision of where we thought we could go, and the benefits that anyone could harness from that. And ultimately, I think a lot of people nodded and said, "Yep, yep, yep." But I'm not sure that that's enough, right? I think we need that intention needs to carry all the way through to action. And for example, I'll give you an example of what I consider to be a relatively great success story on behalf of Millipore Sigma, and then I'll give you what I think is a miss, right? So a great success story: we have a signature program we just launched. It's called our M Scholar program, and basically it's a program wherein for any employees of the company that have children or grandchildren that are people of color, they can apply for a scholarship, and they get granted a scholarship. And it's for the university time. They also get paired with a mentor, and they have the opportunity to come and work on internships while they're at university. And the intention is for the person to be applying to a academically accredited university or program that's focused on STEM, right? So I think it's fantastic. Really early in the pipeline, getting people focused, igniting that curiosity, making things a little bit easier for them when they go to university, giving them an opportunity to work somewhere, having a professional mentor, what have you. I think all great things, right? On the flip side, we've had a lot of management changes recently at the C-level, and we've seen no changes there that are demonstrative of any real diversity, right? So, and that's not to say I don't think the organization isn't trying, but when you preach something and then you don't follow up, it creates a big challenge, right? So here, I think we've got a long way to go, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. But yeah, much work still needs to be done.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Those were some really great ideas for such a complex problem. And as many of you pointed out, having people of color in leadership positions really does help, because I can attest for myself that when I first transitioned into the more science industry, coming from, I really wanted to be a doctor, and I was like, no. The program that I did, I saw that there was a Black woman who was leading that program, and that really made the difference for me, because I then knew for myself that I could do what she had done. So I'm sure that is one of the biggest ways that we can tackle this problem, especially on an organizational level. And I hope, like you said, we're nowhere near where we are, but we are on the way to change, and we can only hope that we get better from here. So next, we have some questions that came up in the chat. So the first question that I'm just going to throw out for anyone to answer is, what was the biggest transition you had to make from high school to college, and how did you tackle it? And anybody can start, unless you guys want me to call someone out.
For me, it was just being away from home, and sort of going from being a big fish in a small pond, sort of academically, to being a small fish in a big pond. I mean, you think you have it sort of all figured out academically when you're in high school, and then you go to college and are around lots of other super smart kids that you no longer feel quite as intelligent as you did in high school. So I mean, for me, that was the biggest thing. I think I knew that I had chosen the right field. I was still in love with kind of science and biology, so that wasn't so much it for me. And I knew that I still had some time to kind of figure out what I was going to do afterward. So that didn't so much cause me a lot of anxiety. It was more just, I think, being away from home and kind of change of scenery.
know,
Yeah.
for me, one transition was just stressing about money a lot. You know, I was lucky enough to have financial aid where I went to college, but even with that, I think it was definitely, you know, always kind of strategizing a little bit if I could make it through to the next semester, and you know, working through my work study job or lining up the next summer job. So I think give yourself a little room to be prepared for that, you know, if that's something that you think you might have to go through, and try to do some work ahead of time before you even start college, of just sketching out the budgets of like, okay, how much is my tuition going to be? What am I going to need to actually make it through the summer, through a full academic year in terms of money, before I can start back in the summer again to try to earn up some money to tank up the bank account. So that was a stressor for me.
I'll go next. I think I didn't know what to do with my freedom. First year university, I think I went nuts. I went wild. I was in London. It was the first time I was free with my time, nobody manning my, you know, ins and outs. I think getting sort of halfway through the first year, I realized that I was going crazy. I was pretty much sleeping in every class. I was partying so much. And I think I told one of my lecturers that I think I was bitten by the tsetse fly in Africa, and it might have been the cause or something like that. I simply had to get it together mid-year. And at that point, I literally sat down and knew that I had to strategize. Meaning I quite vocalized my struggles anyway. In my, you know, degree was biotechnology and biochem was my major. And so I would tell them, teach me as if I was 2 years old, and I would literally have them walk me through. I sought help everywhere. And I think I strategized my classes where you focus on what's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck, which ones, what do I need to focus on to get the highest grades? And I was quite strategic about that in order to make the grades that I wanted to make at the end. Thankfully, ended up with an honors degree. But yeah, it takes some intention and impact on your actions. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, Indeed, I think I tend to agree with what you were saying. Right, there was this newfound freedom, if you will, but with that also came a lot more responsibility, and I wasn't quite sure I understood all that when I first kind of walked in the door. And I think that, coupled with the fact that, you know, in high school, like Ramsey was saying, you kind of figured it out. You have your network of friends. You kind of know, you got that whole support group and everything. And in college, I didn't know anybody else going to college when I walked in the door, right? So that social network also wasn't there that could help you. So you quickly learn to navigate and study groups and get together with people and figure that out. But that was a little bit of a shock to the system, if you will.
I want to add something quickly. Is knowing what you're good at is so important. So I knew I wasn't strong in science, but I wrote brilliant essays, and I knew how to talk to my lecturers, and so I became a class representative. So when you do truly hone in on what your strengths are, I promise you there is magic in that, where wherever I was lacking, I could somehow balance it out with my bringing the problems to the teachers, presenting, or perhaps even writing good essays. So even my experiments, I ended up writing fantastic essays. So I would say to those who might not always feel like they're as good as the others, hone in on your strengths.
Thank you so much, guys, for that amazing advice. So the next question from the audience is, what skills, both technical and social and emotional, do you use every day in your work, and how/where did you learn those?
Well, I'll just jump in. I'll just build on what I just said, which was, part of, I used to have a CEO who used to say, okay, who works for sales? And he wanted everyone's hand to go up, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have no revenue, you're not generating enough to keep the company afloat. And to some degree, you're always trying to persuade or influence people. But early on, I kind of learned that you're not alone, right? Like I said, I just give you a university example where you had to rebuild your social network. And and those go kind of hand in hand. And I use those every single day, right? There's a set of folks that are, part of my formal team that I work with on a regular basis, and we're trying to influence the trajectory of partners that we talk to and influence the point of view that leadership may have on what we're doing there. But then I also have this informal network that allows me to be aware of what's going on in other parts of the company, maybe get a sense of, what mood is that executive going to be in before I walk in the door. Also allows me to leverage their position in the organization and share some insights that I may want to use them to help influence as part of what they're doing, right? So I think the social network is really critical, and that coupled with the need to influence, I think, are really important, and I use those every day.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I've actually never heard of that's my first time hearing about, splitting up the type of networks you have within your organization. So I would say that is very good advice, especially about having an informal network as well, because you learn a lot. Anybody else want to add something?
For me, it's the interpersonal stuff, like the science and the technical aspects of my job are important. And if I'm working on a program that I don't necessarily know a lot about, I can figure that stuff out. The stuff that I sort of use on an everyday basis are interpersonal skills and kind of managing up. In my career, I probably work the closest with my company's chief medical officer, and I always say I'm his handler. So it's like trying to understand what he's going to need and how to get him what he needs on a daily basis. So I think that's something that you can't sort of underestimate the need for good interpersonal skills and how to communicate with people and how to manage teams and manage up as well.
Thank you so much, Ramsey. I definitely think that interpersonal skills are ones that you're going to be utilizing every single day, because most jobs that you get, you're going to have to be interacting in some type of team. So you really need those skills. Any more additions?
I'd like to speak to technical skills and scientific reasoning. So one thing that everyone should know about science is that it's basically like a pyramid. It's very hierarchical. I'd say next to like military organizations, I think science is pretty close in terms of like the hierarchy of it. And I think everyone should know that the goal if you want to go into science, doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, I want to find my way to the top. Just like you don't need to be a 4-star general to have a valuable military career. You don't necessarily need to be some tenure track person who's running a 50-person lab to have a successful scientific career. But I think you do need to be intentional about what you want and the methodical sort of steps of the ladder that you need to go through in order to get there. So I do a lot of computational work, analyzing data and structuring that. I work with people who often have 10 or more years of very deep technical experience working with data. And of course, there's the work that you put in to get that, but it happens very slowly over time, I would argue. It's about building up experiences that allow you to put the time in and compound. So I would encourage folks to really think about and take the time to learn about the structure and the hierarchy of science, not necessarily because everyone wants to get to the top, but because you might have a goal that is, let's say, somewhere in the middle of, okay, I want to have this type of job and do these activities and have this freedom to pursue my interests outside of my career. So just think about and take the time to invest in the career trajectory that's going to get you there. That's going to probably require some type of higher education. Oftentimes it's going to require graduate degrees and different forms of specialization and working experience. And that system can be really complicated and overwhelming at points, but just take your time. Like, you can watch YouTube videos about it. You can try to find someone in your area, whether it's maybe through one of your teachers or through a university, that can just try to explain the system to you, because it's really important part of success, and you're not going to thrive unless you can, in some ways, fall into that pyramid and build off of the momentum and support structures that are there.
Thank you so much, Larson.
And if I would add to that, thank you, Larson, is lead from, what is the phrase? Lead from the bench. I just finished Abby Wambach, the female footballer. She wrote that when she was benched on her final game, she sort of was disheartened. And so she has a chapter about leading from the bench. And I speak to girls, especially, where we've been conditioned to sort of sit and wait your turn, and you sort of, before you take the next step. I think once you've done the what everybody has said here, you've done your homework, you've honed in on the things that you're truly good at, you've been intentional about where you think your next step, your next best step should be, lead from the bench, lead from wherever you are. You know, Amanda Gorman just started writing poems, right? And she ended up at the Biden inauguration. Greta Thunberg was only 15 when she started standing outside of her Swedish parliament with the signs about climate change. So I'm not saying be any of those things, but within yourself and where you want to, you know, head to, in however small, lead from that, lead from the bench, from wherever you are. Each of us, if you're alive, you're a leader. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have another question from the audience, and the question is, did you ever experience someone intentionally or unintentionally trying to get you off the path of science, and how did you get over that? I can start by telling you guys, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. And all my life I wanted to be a doctor. And I know that medical school is not that far from being science-based, but when I told my parents I did not want to be a doctor, they didn't believe me. And I feel like to this day, they keep asking me when I'm going to go to medical school. And the answer is never. You know, so I say that, you know, you just have to hold on to truly what you want to do. And if you know that science is a path you want to take, make sure that you stand your ground. If you actually explain, if it's your family members, your friends, you know, explain to them the passion that you have and that you can be successful in this field. You don't have to do this other specific field that they're trying to get you into. So it really means just like knowing your passion and following it, and knowing that you're taking the right path for yourself is what I would say.
No one's ever tried to convince me not to go into science, but I think, you know, I do try and tell people that there are other options out there other than medical school. I think people do sort of think if I want to go into the sciences, if I want to go into if I want to take care of people and help people, I have to be a doctor. And, you know, I think people don't realize that there are other things to do out there. There are other contributions that can be made to science and healthcare, and that don't involve going to medical school, and in fact don't even necessarily involve, you know, getting your PhD or going to grad school. Or so, you know, I think that that's the one thing I usually try and remind people, is that there's, you know, a whole world of science and academia and healthcare and technology out there to explore without necessarily having to have an MD after your name.
Yeah, I want to build on that, Ramsey, if you don't mind. So I studied engineering, electrical engineering, computer science, undergrad, got my MBA, and have done work, everything from being in a research lab to product management and, you know, investments and what have you. And even though I wasn't doing science, I was doing something STEM related, right? So even when I'm looking at financial investments, right, you have to know how to value that company. And some of that is related to just the economics. Some of that's related to, hey, do they have any patents? What are those patents like? I work with my R&D team They, of course, figure out what the impact of the patents are because I don't have that science background. I work with our manufacturing guys that go in and understand, hey, how much can these guys manufacture? How much bandwidth do they have? You know, is it something that we could have to invest in or what have you? So there's a whole host of different STEM related skill sets that come into play. When I did management consulting, and I did that for 7 years, so quite a lot of time, you're looking at a company's strategy, what markets they're going in, you're trying to understand customer needs. All of those things have a qualitative side to them, but they also have a very fact-based side to them, where you're looking at hard data, statistical results from surveys or what have you that you're doing. So this thread of STEM, you know, kind of shows up everywhere. And even though we all have significantly powerful computers and phones and what have you, if I'm paying cash, which I don't do very often, but if I'm paying, I still count my change. I don't assume that the cashier or the computer in front of them, you know, generated the right change. I still count my change, right? So I think there's a thread of STEM in everything that we do, and for some people, it's going to be the core part of their career. For other people, it's not, but they're going to be working in that environment. Even when I worked in financial services, so I worked for a bank. And I can tell you that a significant part of that organization, and this was a Fortune 100 company, a significant part of that organization was the software and IT infrastructure. You know, the security measures they have in place to manage their money, that they have to have in place to make sure they're not managing funds from, you know, let's call it people who are on a wanted list and what have you. The relationships they have with other banks and what have you. There's a lot of technology in everything that we do.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a very in-depth answer. Any more contributions? Okay, so we're just about out of time. So I have one last question for our panelists. But before everyone, please be sure to check out the other activities going on during STEM Week, using the calendar linked in the chat, and give us a shout out on social media using the hashtag we also shared in the chat. A special thank you to the United Way's BoSTEM, Boston Public Schools, all the panelists, and everyone else who contributed for making this happen for our students today. And my last question to y'all is, what advice do you have for our future STEM professionals watching right now? And let's start with you, Ndidi.
I say, just do it. Stay curious. The STEM field, I think both gentlemen just spoke to that. But the STEM field is pretty broad. It's quite vast. I've only ever worked in the biotech pharma industry. Even within that, it's a pretty broad range of career options you can choose. There's always going to be people discouraging you, right? In her book, Becoming, Michelle Obama too spoke about that, careers counselors not believing in her. So focus on who you are and what you want, you know, and as I said, within just the biotech industry alone, there's still accountants, there's still, you know, sales, there's marketing, there's graphics people that do all of our drugs, that, you know, the labeling on the drugs, there's, you know, the legal department looking at patents. So whatever you want to do, the STEM field is pretty broad. Stay with knowing who you are and what you want. As I mentioned earlier, there's magic in you. Unleash your own individuality, and trust that being authentic is just fine. There's power in the collective, honing on your collective, your folks that you have within your village. And then, yeah, go ahead with having the intention and setting the course. You know, you are, after all, the master of your own fate, right? I think I wrote a little thing. I'm a little writer on the side. I want to read it quickly. Is know thyself, unleash your individuality. There's power in the collective, so bring in the community. Lead with grit and a whole lot of intention. I promise you'll reach a new dimension. Thank you.
Okay, Ramsey, you want to go second?
Sure. I would say, you know, it's all the things we've talked about already. You know, be passionate, do what you're passionate about and what you enjoy, and don't let anyone tell you any different. Make good relationships, have some good relationships, meet some good people, have some good mentors, really make some relationships, forge some relationships in your career that that you have people that you can ask advice and what they would do in certain situations. But most importantly, have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take life too seriously. Just enjoy what you're doing and find some joy every day in how you're making your living and your chosen profession.
Thank you, Ramsey. Larson, you want to go second to last?
Sure. My advice, I want to talk about two ideas. One is credibility and one is competency. I think you need to, if you want to go into STEM, you need to have attention to both of those things. Credibility to me is a lot of those resume virtues. What's going to appear on your resume that's going to really get your foot in the door for, trying to walk your way up that pyramid or find where within the pyramid you aspire to be and the contributions that you want to make. So that, like I said before, that has to do with your past experiences, your education. There's a lot of signaling that goes into science. Some of it's helpful, some of it's really just about checking the boxes, but you have to pay attention that you're building up that long-term credibility. And then the second area, and one that I think is more important, is competency, which is making sure that you take ownership of the ideas and you're pushing yourself to become an expert in something. And that might start with the classes that you take, but eventually it'll be about delivering a real world project that's no one's ever done before, either because you're working within a company that's trying something new, or you're working within a lab or a research environment where people are doing research for the very first time. And that takes a lot of focus and discipline. And so my advice is just be methodical and disciplined and work to push yourself to be an expert and trust yourself that you can become an expert if you put the time and the work in.
Thank you, Larson. I definitely agree with that. And also consistency really plays a big part in achieving both of those qualities. And last but not least, we have Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think my colleagues have said incredible things, and I think it's all wonderful advice. For me, the thing that was a spark for me, which is what I look for when I'm hiring people as well, and what I look for in terms of people that I like to be around, is curiosity, right? People who are curious tend to ask questions. They tend to have this innate desire to want to understand or learn things. They're willing to get outside their comfort zone. Maybe not all the time, because it could be a little stressful, but get outside their comfort zone and experience something new, something different. They also tend to actually want to share that with other people, right? So they kind of pay it forward, right? They cultivate other people and hopefully ignite some of that spark for them as well, right? So for me, curiosity is the number one thing. So just say, hey, be curious.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I really want to thank all our panelists here today for the amazing, wonderful advice and their journeys, especially into their careers in STEM. And thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure our future STEM professionals will be very, very grateful. And I hope that they will take some of your advice and use it in the future as they progress into their own STEM careers. I want to thank everyone again, and please join us tomorrow at the same time, same link for another STEM Week career panel. And I hope you all have a good afternoon.